How do you feel when your parents give you chores to do? After God creates the whole world and finishes by creating man, he puts man in the garden and gives him a job. Now, this job may sound unimportant or even boring to us, but he put man in the garden to cultivate it and to keep it, to grow it. Much like parents have jobs for their children to do, God had a job for Adam and really for all mankind. He made us to follow in his footsteps and to take care of everything in our sphere, everything on this earth. And for Adam, that was the garden. If you look at Genesis chapter 2 and verse 9, it says, God caused all these trees and plants to grow out of the ground, all that were pleasing to the eye and good for eating. The tree of life was there, and also the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Then, down in chapter 2 and verse 15, God places Adam into the garden and tells him to cultivate it and to keep it. So as God put Adam in the garden, God told Adam he could eat of any tree. He was free to eat of any tree, except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because on the day that he ate of that tree, he would surely die. So God made the garden, made all the trees grow and bear fruit, and he put man in the garden to not only cultivate it, but also to enjoy it with some simple boundaries that were for Adam's good. But after this, we see the first time that God looks at his creation and says, this isn't good. God looks at the garden he's created, and it's good. And the man that he's created, and man itself is good. But there's something that's off. In verse 18, God says it's not good for man to be alone. So when God saw Adam's loneliness, he started to bring every single animal, birds and land animals, every single one to Adam, and Adam gave them all names. Spot. Easy. Baldy. Platypus? How about Perry? Jeff with a G. Stinky McStinkerness? I am unqualified to name this one. Now, when Adam did it, it probably looked nothing like that. But there was a purpose in what God was doing. Through bringing all the animals to Adam, it showed that not one of them was suitable or helpful to Adam in filling the need that God wanted to fill. So the Lord caused a deep sleep to fall on Adam, took one of Adam's ribs, and from it he made woman. Now don't get me wrong, I like having all of my ribs. But if I had to live my whole life alone in a garden with a bunch of animals, I think I would go bonkers. Here's what I want us to see. God created the world, made us to take care of it, gave us a job. But then as he saw us in the condition we were in, he saw that we needed something more. So you can see that in this chapter of Genesis that God equips us to work like we need to. He understands the needs that we have, and he provides for those needs. And this is the part where in all the movies and the fairy tales that we love, it would say, and they lived happily ever after. But things go south pretty quickly.
Crocky.
So look at this snake here.
This little guy may look all cute and innocent, but really he's a crafty little devil.
Who are you?
What are you on about, mate? I'm you.
Yeah, we're trying to film here.
Why do you think I'm here? Do you know a single lick about snakes?
Well, I mean,
I bet you couldn't tell a cottonmouth apart from a water moccasin, could you? Yeah, that's what I thought. Anyway, like I was saying, this little devil may look all cute and innocent, but there's always a snake in the grass. When you least expect it, they come, they bite your ankles, they do. And it hurts. It hurts, man. Crocky, what I'm trying to say is you always got to be on the lookout. Look out for these little snakes in the grass. They're always hiding in the bushes when you least expect them. Crocky, here's one now. There's always a bigger snake. I'll see you later.
Okay. Don't know what that guy was all about. But let's get back to the point. After Genesis 2 ends and everything seems to be going well as God's provided for man and man and woman are living in the garden, chapter 3 opens up talking about the serpent. It says of the snake that it's the most crafty of all the creatures that God created. It's sneaky. It's always trying to trick us. I guess that's what our weirdly dressed friend was trying to tell us. But in chapter 3, as the snake comes into the garden, it starts talking to Eve and starts to deceive her. Right away, we see the snake start asking Eve questions, asking her about the things that God has commanded for them. And if you remember from a little bit earlier, when we talked about the boundaries that God set for us, those are the very things that the snake starts to question Eve about. You see in chapter 3, verse 1, the snake says, "Indeed, has God said that you shall not eat of any tree of the garden?" And Eve starts going through all the things that God has said. He said, we can eat of any of these trees, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we can't eat of that tree, or else we'll die. And this is where our crafty little friend lies to Eve. He tells her that God doesn't want her to eat of it because the day that she does, her eyes will be opened and she'll be like God. The snake was so crafty that just by simply asking Eve questions and one little lie, he got her to doubt in what God had said. As Eve heard the snake whispering in her ear and she listened to that lie and listened to those questions, it began to make her look at the fruit differently. What seems like wasn't a temptation before, now the fruit started to look more desirable. And as it turns out, she took it and she ate it. Ultimately, what the snake did is it made Eve lose her trust in God and begin to trust herself and her own thoughts more. And what's worse is that Eve took the fruit after she had taken a bite and she shared it with Adam. The very person that God had given Adam to help him ended up causing him to stumble. And that really is one of the most important messages from this story. That as we begin to trust in ourselves and what we want and what we think more than we trust in what God has said for us, not only does that hurt us, but it also hurts the people that we want to help. I mean, think about the fact that Eve was made to help Adam. Just like you're made to help all the people that you love and all the people in your life. But because she began to follow what she wanted instead of what God wanted for her, she ultimately ended up hurting herself and Adam too. So here are the lessons to think about from Genesis chapters 2 and 3. The first one is that God has put us on this earth for a purpose. Just like Adam was made to cultivate the garden, we're here to serve God's purposes and help the world and the people around us. Second lesson, God doesn't want us to do that alone. Just like God gave Adam Eve, He's also put people in our lives to help us so that we can be better equipped to do the job and to serve the people that He wants us to. And the third and final lesson, while you're trying to serve the purposes God has for you and love the people around you, the devil's always going to be there trying to get you to trust in yourself more than God and to be self-centered. The real problem that we learn in this story is that the devil's really good at that too. And the truth is we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fall for his lies, and we're all going to trust ourselves at some point more than we trust God. And we're going to end up hurting ourselves and the people around us. But the story of Adam and Eve doesn't end here, and more importantly, the story of the Bible doesn't end here. This very chapter of Genesis, the very beginning of the Bible, leads us directly to our need for the gospel and Jesus' death on the cross. In this very chapter, in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, God actually makes his first promise about the coming Messiah, about Jesus Christ. So while the devil is really crafty and probably is going to trick you a bunch of times, God had already made a plan to bring Jesus Christ into this world to save us from those mistakes that we would make. So while we got to look out for that serpent and not believe the lies and not fall for his questions, ultimately we can always trust in God more because he always has a plan to bring us back to him. So that's Genesis 2 and 3. I hope you think about some of those lessons. But we want to hear from you. What are some of the jobs that you think God has given you to do? What are some of the ways you can be helpful? Who are some of the people that God's put in your life that you're thankful for, who encourage you and help you? And how can we learn to trust in God and his word more so that we don't fall for the lies of the serpent? And finally, do you think you could do a better job at naming the animals than I could? Quacker, quacker, doofus. Nailed it. Take a video of yourself answering those questions, one or all of them, send it to us, and we'll try and put it in our video next week. Well, that's all we got for this week. We'll catch you next week with the story of Cain and Abel.